at some point, swim over somewhere over here so you can take a look at them while I'm over here rambling about my recent trip to Malaga, Spain. In the past, I always did one of these recap videos after I got back from one of these international trips, and they don't usually do very well. Not too many people seem to click on them and watch them, but when I haven't made the videos, I've gotten a lot of questions about these trips, either in the comments, in my messages on Instagram, or even through email. So I figured I'll start doing these again. So this one's going to be about my recent trip to Malaga, Spain. Today is like January 22nd as I'm recording this. So it's been about 2 months since that trip finished almost, which is crazy to think about. I went over on that trip over Thanksgiving break, so that's, what is that, third or fourth week of November, whenever that is. So yeah, about 2 months ago. Crazy how long it's taken me to record this. But basically this video is going to be in two little sections. Section one will be about kind of my trip there, non-fishing related, like getting there, how it was being there, how it was getting around there, how easy it was to communicate, get around, those sorts of things. And then the second part of this video will be fishing specific. So let's get into the first part, which is my trip there. So number one, out of Miami at least, flights to Spain are extremely cheap, at least by the cost per mile flown. I paid $450 to go from Miami to Malaga, Spain, through London Heathrow. So I had a layover in London, but that is amazing, at least in my opinion. Going somewhere in the Caribbean, which is 2 hours away from Miami, very, very close, couple hundred miles. Those trips are usually over $450. So to be able to get all the way to the other side of the Atlantic for $450 was amazing. Now that was a really good deal. Usually they're going to be a little bit more expensive than that, but you can still find flights from Miami to almost any city in Spain: Madrid, Barcelona, Malaga, Valencia, for well under $600 or $700 most of the time. So really cheap to get there. Fairly convenient. Flew British Airways, so nothing too crazy. It was a little bit longer because you have to go all the way up to London and back down to Malaga, but it wasn't too bad. The bad part was once I got to Malaga and I stood by the baggage claim and my bag never showed up. Then I had to go stand in another line to file a lost baggage complaint, and as soon as I did that, they told me my bag was still in London. So I missed out on 1 day of fishing because I didn't have my bag. They delivered the bag to my hotel about 24 hours later. It was like the next night, so I missed out on a full day of fishing, but I still got, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days of fishing in, which wasn't too bad. 6 would have been better, but 5 isn't too bad. And then Malaga was fairly cheap. I mean, a lot of Europe's going to be cheaper than, South Florida, Miami, or really any kind of major city in the U.S. I think my hotel was like $60 a night. Most of the places I ate, I was able to eat for, like a full meal, a nice dinner, plus a drink for less than $15, maybe less than $20, so still cheaper than what it would cost me somewhere down here in South Florida. So that was really nice. The weather was perfect. It was in like the lows were in like the low 50s, highs in like the mid 70s, so beautiful that time of year. Didn't rain at all. It was like overcast and partly cloudy most of the time, so just really, really enjoyable weather. Conversing with people, I speak the most rudimentary amount of Spanish possible. I could probably ask where the bathroom is and maybe order a hamburger, and that's about it. So I was able to do that, but most people were able to speak English fairly well, at least better than I'm able to speak Spanish. So that was very convenient and a very pleasant city to get around in. I stayed mostly in like one area by the, I don't even know what it was by, but I stayed in this one area of Malaga, very easy to get by. They had a bus that ran like the length of the coastline. They got very nice sidewalks, easy to get around, all that kind of stuff, lots of grocery stores and whatnot. So very convenient and easy to stay in that area. Can't speak for other parts of Malaga, but I have a feeling they're probably going to be very similar. And I think that's going to be enough about the city and the location and my journey there. As far as that goes, outside of my bag getting lost, I have to give it, 4.5 out of 5 stars. Really easy to get there, really cheap to get there, and really enjoyable and affordable once I was there. So yeah, 4.5 out of 5 stars. All right, now on to the fishing. So the diversity, I wasn't sure what to expect. My goal going in was like 15 different species, and I was hoping I could get maybe like 10 or 12 new ones because I did fish that part of the world a little bit, and the diversity of habitats isn't that great. Basically, the entire shoreline has these sandy beaches, and then every couple hundred yards or so, there's a jetty. So there's dozens of these jetties all up and down the coastline, and that is really all that I fished. But you got some different habitats. You got some sandy habitats. You got some rocky habitats. You can cast out further. You could drop among the rocks. You can fish like the little tide pools, kind of among the rocks. I don't know if I'd really classify them as tide pools. You can fish the very small amount of water, kind of in between and among the rocks. So not a ton of different habitats, but there was enough there to keep a pretty good diversity. So I just did my usual kind of fishing. Dropper loop setup with a little bit of shrimp was my go-to. And then I fished some shrimp on like a little split shot rig when I was dropping kind of among the rocks closer to shore. But as far as species go, I believe we got 21 different ones with 17 new ones getting added to the life list. I'm going to glance over to my right here where I have my list. The first one is the common two-banded sea bream. That's the first species I caught. Caught those also in the Canary Islands when I fished there a couple of years ago. So fairly common catch. Might have been, I don't know, the second, third most common species that I caught over there. So nothing all that exciting. Second species I caught was the Mediterranean chromis. This was the first new species that I got for my life list. Scientific name is Chromis chromis. So I think damselfish look very beautiful, kind of just by their shape. I guess maybe that's why they're called damselfish. Anyway, this one has a very boring olive brown color, but very, very nice subtle metallic purples on the dorsal fin. So look very nice in person. Doesn't come out that nice in video. Third species was the ringneck blenny, which was definitely the most common small bottom dwelling fish there. This might have been the most common species that I caught there. They were just all over every single area that I fished over there. But overall, a fairly ugly looking blenny species. Next up, the butterfly winged comber. Just a comber species. There's several different ones in the Mediterranean. I caught the blacktail comber in the Canary Islands a couple years ago, but this was my first butterfly winged comber. I ended up catching maybe 10 of these guys or something like that. Overall, just kind of boring looking fish. Next one was the ornate wrasse, which was a beautiful species, but I caught way, way more of these in the Canary Islands than I would like to admit. I think I caught 88 of them, if I remember correctly, a couple of years ago, which is a ton. So beautiful, beautiful species, but I do not like this fish at all. I noticed that almost any sort of tropical or subtropical area around the world has at least one wrasse species that is more common than any other. And here and in the Canaries, it's the ornate wrasse. After that, I got a Salima porgy, which was pretty cool. At first, I misidentified it as a bogue, which we'll catch later on. Pretty cool looking little porgy species. After I caught it, did some research, found out that it has some sort of chemical inside of it, where if you eat it, it's like being on LSD, which was very interesting. I'm glad I did not do a catch and cook on that. After that, we caught a comber, so just a regular comber, first time catching these guys as well. Another fairly boring and bland looking species. Then we got a blacktail wrasse. Only caught 2 of these, which was interesting. I thought I would have caught more of these. But I caught one intermediate phase and one terminal phase, I believe, so they look different, but still the same species. Overall, fairly cool looking fish. Then we got a bogue. Caught several of these over my 5 days of fishing there. Again, rather boring looking species, just kind of like a long, skinny, silvery fish. Nothing all that exciting. Then I got a little dusky grouper. Actually ended up catching 3 of these, all about the same size. Looks pretty cool. It's got a very shiny black to it, but then it's also got this gold patterning a little bit on the sides. Looks fairly nice. Then we got a Molly Miller blenny. caught 2 of these guys over my trip there. Not a new species because I caught 1 in the Canary Islands, but I also caught, I think, 1 in Florida actually. So I'm always impressed by some of these species that have such a massive range. Like they're found all the way here in Florida on the western Atlantic and, well, still the northwestern Atlantic because we're above the equator, but fairly down south in the northwestern Atlantic. And then they're found all the way on the eastern Atlantic, also fairly far north. I think Malaga is like on the latitude of like Philadelphia maybe, which is just kind of a guess, which is fairly far north compared to where like Miami is, where I caught this fish down here in Florida. So always amazed by these species that have such a massive range over like 2 different sides of the ocean. But yeah, not a new species. Then we got a rock goby, which was really cool. After catching a ton of ringneck blannies and 1 Motley Miller blannie, finally got a rock goby. It doesn't look really cool, but I love any sort of like small bottom dwelling species like goby, so that was cool. Then I caught a Mediterranean cardinal fish, my second one ever. Caught 1 of the Canaries. Love cardinal fish. Almost all of them, or most of them, have like some really, really nice red colors on them. And this one was no exception, but caught 1 before, not a new species. Then we got a saddled sea bream, caught a little juvenile of this. Just a boring looking little sea bream species, nothing special about it. Then I got a Senegal sea bream, which was cool. So I don't know exactly where. It might be around like eastern Spain, like maybe Valencia, where the west of that you got the Senegal sea bream. East of that you got the auxiliary sea bream, I think. Really, really similar. Some small differences in coloration, but you really got to count the anal rays to figure out which one is which. So that was pretty cool. Didn't even know the species existed until I went to identify it. But again, just a boring little silvery sea bream porgy species. Then we got a black sea bream. What was interesting about this catch is that I was down to, I believe, literally my last piece of shrimp. I had been catching a lot of these same species over and over again, and I decided to drop down 1 more time with my final piece of shrimp, and this species came up. And it was a new species for the life list, and that is still the only black sea bream I've ever caught in my life, which is pretty cool. Like what would have happened if I didn't make that last drop, if I just ran out of shrimp 1 fish earlier? Never would have caught that thing. So I'm always curious at how many species I've missed out on over the years just by kind of luck like that. Maybe I run out of bait a little bit too early, or I give up a little bit too early, or a fish bites the bait but doesn't get hooked. And that's the one and only time that I ever encountered that fish species and I didn't get to catch it. So kind of interesting to think about that. Then I got a rusty blanny and ended up catching, I think, 4 of these or something like that during this 1 session. But during this 1 session was the only time during this trip I ran into the rusty blannies, which was interesting because I thought I would have run into a bunch of them all over the place, but all we got really in all the places were the ringneck blannies. So it was cool to get a couple of these rusties, which I thought we were going to get a lot of. Then I got 1 giant goby, which really surprised me. I was fishing a fairly small area in between some of these rocks on the jetty, where I was catching like all these like fairly small little goby and blanny species. And then I feel this like big tank of a fish. I thought it was a puffer at first, but yeah, ended up being a giant goby. Then we pulled up a very cool little blanny. Does not have a common name, and the scientific name is escaping my head right now. Probably should have wrote it in the notes. All I wrote in the notes is no common name because I knew I was going to remember that. But yeah, fairly cool blanny species. I knew it was something different as soon as I caught it because the bars were a little bit more defined than they were on the ringneck blannies. So that was a pretty cool catch. Then I did some lure fishing and I caught a painted comber, which was very interesting. These guys are found more so in the eastern Mediterranean, whereas the butterfly wing combers are in the western Mediterranean. So I got a lot of butterfly wing combers, but this was the only painted comber I caught, which was cool. And then I also got a gold blotch grouper on a little swim bait, which was interesting. And that was the final new species, actually the final fish species that I caught during this Malaga trip. So overall, this trip exceeded my expectations. I already talked about how it was like a 4.5 out of 5 stars for like the trip itself, not counting the fishing. And if we add the fishing, I think I would have to give the fishing like a 3.5 out of 5. Not as good as like some of the other places I've been to, like let's say Singapore or like Okinawa in Japan or Phuket in like Thailand, like any sort of like tropical place like that is just going to be, you know, a 5 out of 5. But for like a subtropical place, fairly far north, fairly far above the equator, where there's not as much diversity as down in the tropics, I really don't have any complaints. So yeah, really, really good trip. I believe it was 17 new species that were added to the life list, which was really cool. And overall, it was a really good trip. So yeah, if you got any more questions about Malaga, Spain, let me know. Hope you liked those videos that came out over the last several weeks. And yeah, that's going to do it. Hope you guys liked this video, and I'll see you next time.